fired nevertheless. I want to help her set up.
You can be in charge of making sure the mosquitoes don't come around.
Well, maybe I should
Terry?
get kind of like break.
Okay, Chang-Ming, we gotta have you sit down. We're gonna get started. No, you're okay. I'd like to call the Saline City Council meeting to order. Please rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Before I call the roll and begin this evening's meeting, it is with deep regret that I acknowledge the passing of Richard Dick Nearing in recent days. Mr. Nearing was a friend to many of us on council, a longtime planning commissioner, city council member, and a very active community leader in the broader Saline community. City council and city staff and the entire city of Saline extends our deepest sympathies to his wife, children, and grandchildren during this very difficult time. And I would ask my city council colleagues and those in the audience to join me now in a moment of silence in honor of Dick Nearing. Thank you very much. Members present this evening are council members Gearboss, CO Lesh, Harmont, Mayor Pro Tem Dillon, and Mayor Morrow. Council member Rice will be absent today. Everyone should have received an email from her earlier this afternoon. And from city staff, we have the city manager, city clerk, community development director, and our wastewater treatment superintendent. At this time, is there a motion to approve the agenda as, the clerk can correct me if I'm wrong, as amended? Was there an addition or subtraction between Wednesday when the agenda went out and this evening?
I'll move to approve it with that amendment.
Okay, very good. It's been moved by Gearboss to approve as amended. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Harmont. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. Is there a motion now to excuse the absence of our council colleague Nicole Rice?
So moved.
Moved by Dillon, and was that seconded by Lesh?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. All those in favor of excusing the absence signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We come now to public comments on agenda items. Under the Open Meetings Act, any person may come forward at this time, make comment or question on an item that appears on this agenda. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested but not required to state his or her name and address for the record. Are there any citizen comments on specific agenda items this evening?
Yes. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council, friends, especially my dear friend, Mr. Ben Harrigan. I'm kind of really excited, but also sad. As you all know, Ben will not continue to serve us for the next 20 years. He's leaving. Last time I talked to him in the hallway, I said that it reminded me Jefferson, who initiated the important document, the independence of this nation. Ben has contributed greatly. So, because 3 minutes left and don't want to talk too much about that, and then please, we always remember you. And also, you set an example. The recruiting team did wonderful work during the most difficult time in the history of Saline. You come along, and you will go. However, the city of Saline have the spirit, which is continue the legacy. All of you the best. Mr. Mayor, Jack CO, and also, of course, of Dean, and have a lot of legacy. So we will continue. Do I have another 20 seconds?
You have 1 minute and 30, but you got to focus on an issue that's specific to the agenda.
Another thing is, I really feel sad, but also feel encouraged. I urge you all to vote yes to continue the service by the wonderful woman. Her name, as you know, I'll read. Police Chief Marlene Resnick. She has been doing very, very good job, just like all of our staffs and others besides you. Please. So continue to let her to serve us and lead us. Another thing I want to add is that for the wonderful work, Jack Seal and Chuck to lead us to do a lot of work besides the governmental things and the art of government, but also be with us. For the activities, wonderful use of our big open space in the park. How many people were there? It's a wonderful jazz park. So I want to thank you so much.
Thank you, Cheng-Ming. Are there additional citizen comments on agenda items this evening? You'll be limited to 3 minutes. Please come forward to the podium.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is Luke Schmerberg with Schmerberg Law, 209 East Michigan, just over the hill that way. I'm here to speak on agenda item, the resolution, proposed resolution 24154, the annexation of the Jerry's Tire property into the city of Saline from Pittsfield Township. I represent the owners of the property, and I want to thank City Manager Colleen O'Toole for answering pretty much all the questions that we had in a couple of conversations today. Understand that there are some aspects of the property that maybe would not be approved if that construction was to take place today. But then again, that property that's been on there for certainly longer than I've been alive, than some of the people on the council have been alive. And the idea of the particular provision of the zoning for that SPA1 zone, noting that existing structures shall be retained and reused whenever possible. That's 11A7C out of the zoning code dealing with the SPA1 special zoning district that is going to be covered in that area. So I wanted to issue a public notice to the City Council that, having again discussed the matter with City Manager O'Toole, the resolution, the motion as described in the agenda has the full support of the property owner at 7911 East Michigan Avenue, and looking forward to becoming members of the city in full.
Thank you, Mr. Schmerberg. We appreciate your comments, and hopefully you'll be able to remain with us until we get to that item in the event that there are any questions or comments that are best addressed by you on behalf of the applicant. Thank you again. Are there any additional citizen comments from those in the audience? I would defer to the city clerk. Were there any written comments submitted in advance of tonight's meeting in which the individual wanted their remarks read at this time? Easy enough. Then we will transition to the consent agenda. The following consent agenda will normally be adopted without discussion. However, at the request of any citizen or council member, any item may be removed from the consent agenda for discussion.
Moved as distributed.
Moved by CO to approve as distributed. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Dillon. Hearing no discussion, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to unfinished business, agenda item 24-139, Police Chief Contract Renewal. This will be a motion to renew or not to renew the employment contract with Marlene Radzik through June 30th, 2026.
Move
To
to
acknowledge?
Second acknowledgement.
Okay, I'll take the acknowledgement. Moved by Dillon to acknowledge, and that was seconded by Gearbaugh?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Lesher, is your motion going to be to approve?
Yes.
We'll get you on the next one. Okay. City Manager O'Toole, would you like to make any comments as a follow-up to our previous meeting in which this item was discussed?
Just in general, the contract at this point is expired, but it does have an automatic extension period, so there's no concern about Chief Radzik continuing to serve in her duties. She is fully committed to that. The contract you see before you with the changes were at the request of the employee. I am happy to take direction from council. Ultimately, it is you who decide on that employment contract, as the contract is with the city.
Very good. Are there questions for the city manager, Mayor Pro Tem Dillon?
Thank you. I had asked that this matter be postponed to this meeting because there was one change to the contract, which is adding a car allowance, a per-month car allowance. And my concern with doing that, and it has nothing to do with the contract, the employee, or anything like that, is that it is setting a precedent for others that I want to make sure that we understand, is this a door we want to open? Right now, we have very limited use of car allowances, meaning that the city manager and then one other employee has a car allowance. And so understanding if that is something that we want to do, if it's necessary to do, and so what I had proposed as a compromise was that on those occasions when there is a need for the chief to come in after-hours, emergency use, that we agree upon a stipulated on-call fee that we pay rather than a monthly fee. So it would be based on on-call amounts. So that's just where I wanted to open up the conversation and see how my colleagues felt about it.
Additional questions for the city manager? Mr. Gearbaugh?
And that is kind of the same concern that I've had, is that, we've made a lot of changes and attempted to reduce our costs and such, and by putting in place another $5,400 or whatever it is, $540 a month, whatever the dollar amount was. I'd like to know, as Councilmember Dillon mentioned, what is the potential for this playing out? Because I already know that one of my concerns with this is that it kind of plays out to the fact that it's a distance issue. We have directors and such that also live a far distance, that despite there being a need to be on call, we have staff that are paid for on call. Those directors don't have that type of benefit. And as we talk about parity and everything, I'm trying to figure out how would you achieve this, and what would you be considering issues with other staff and directors at this time?
At this time, there's no other considerations for different staff members. So the police chief is a unique position in that, aside from myself and the deputy chief, that is one of very few positions within the organization that has a contract. And again, as we covered previously with the deputy chief, that was more out of necessity as we moved him out of a union position to solidify what his union benefits would be moving forward. So in reality, on a recurring basis, myself and the police chief are the only two contract employees of the city. And thus why it is largely in council's lap what you would like to do with those contracts. As far as all other employees, they'd be subject to our personnel policies, so that would, again, take an action of council to formally change. The one other individual that we have who does receive a vehicle stipend, it was determined that the cost to have a dedicated vehicle for them to travel to and from court was simply more expensive than, so that was a financial decision.
And your recommendation of not providing the individual with a car is concerned because of liability and?
Yes, so there's a myriad of reasons why having a dedicated vehicle causes some concern for me. One is the liability associated with its personal use. Two is just the public appearance of having a city marked vehicle outside of the city, far outside of the city at numerous times. And then just the general maintenance and upkeep. So there's not just the hard cost of the vehicle, but the time that it takes our maintenance staff. So that's time away from other vehicles when we have to prioritize a vehicle that isn't a primary operational function of the city.
And then lastly, if we were to propose a different dollar amount for a monthly amount, we could potentially do that as council?
Absolutely, that is your discretion.
Thank you.
Any additional questions for the city manager?
Yeah, I have a question. So
Please.
is there any expectation of the performance of the vehicle that the chief would be driving? I mean, would they be expected to take it to an on-site call? Would it a response?
So the expectation would be that that vehicle was available, that vehicle could be used for both public or personal and business purposes. It is their personally owned vehicle that they are providing themselves to meet the obligation of being an emergency on-call, a member of staff. So there's no obligation to have it marked. Certainly, we could require it when they're on scene by having stickers or things like that. But really, the only obligation is they can no longer submit for reimbursement for travel because they have a dedicated stipend.
So would the requirement, I guess what I'm getting at is, would the requirements of the vehicle, from a safety standpoint, would the vehicle need to be equipped with certain type of equipment that maybe a stipend would not cover in a reasonable expectation? Like, I don't know what type of vehicle that they would be required to bring to
No, at this time, there would be no specific requirements. Certainly, if council wanted there to be specific requirements about the vehicle, they could apply those. But then in all likelihood, it would be our obligation to pay for those costs if there was like a specific outfitting of a vehicle.
Any additional questions before we vote on the motion to acknowledge receipt? Mayor Pro Tem Dillon.
Thank you. So just for clarification, while the employee's at work, if they are responding to a call, are they responding in a police vehicle?
Typically, they should be.
So then this vehicle is just primarily getting them to and from their residence to the city hall. So during the workday, they are using a city vehicle.
So during the workday, it really depends on the availability of vehicles. If the patrol units are out and there's not like another city car available, it is possible that a personal vehicle is used. I can tell you, because you provide me a stipend, I use my personal vehicle for all city travel. But again, that's the nature of the arrangement you have with my contract.
Right. But your vehicle, you're not, in your position, you're not required to have safety mechanisms.
Correct.
Lights,
Correct. Yep.
cameras, you know, all that kind of thing. So I don't think that's an apples-to-apples comparison. So I would think that when our police chief is on duty, they should be in a police vehicle. And, you know, I think that that's a part of the position. It's part of the protocol, is to have those mechanisms of that vehicle at their disposal, excuse me. So I view it as a vehicle that's being used to and from their home to the office. And like I said, that's why I would propose some sort of on-call stipend for, on those occasions, outside of their normal working hours. If they are coming to the office for an emergency, then they can be reimbursed. To reimburse somebody for just driving from their home to work, I think just opens up the door to others.
Any additional questions on the proposed contract? Mr. Seo and then Mr. Lesh.
Just a comment, Your Honor. When I was employed here as a deputy chief of police, I was furnished with a city vehicle. It was an old police car, so it was readily identified as a police vehicle. And when I was traveling out of the city, many times people tried to hail me to assist them with traffic concerns or one thing and another that appeared to be going wrong. But I had no jurisdiction outside of the city limits. So even though I was traveling in a vehicle, a city-owned vehicle, outside the city limits, within rights as provided me by the contract, I was trying to be hailed by other people who had no knowledge of where I worked or what I did to assist them. So that was an uncomfortable position. It was remedied by me finally just being issued a sedan, a normal Ford sedan, which was not readily recognizable as a police car. I was called in to do things like weather surveillance when we had severe weather warnings. I was called in for deaths that occurred at all hours of the day and night. On the weekends, frequently I assisted with things like traffic control, where I donned a uniform even though I had a plain car. I'd park the vehicle out off the street and assist with traffic control for things like MIS races and so on. So there were any number of occasions off duty where I came into work where I don't think another department head would normally come in. So I understand what you're saying about maybe being in a car that's equipped with lights and siren. I think that's helpful. It's easy to add one of those little Kojak lights where you stick it up on the roof with a magnet and plug it into the cigarette lighter, or plug it into the outlet now. I guess they don't have cigarette lighters anymore. But I will vote in favor of this. I think that it's a good thing for the chief to have a vehicle at their disposal that they're expected to use on an official capacity, even beyond normal working hours.
Very good. Mr. Lesh, again, we're drifting a little bit more into discussion. I want to keep the focus at the moment on questions for the city manager regarding the contract. We'll get to a subsequent motion either to approve or to reject, and at that time we can have, well, not unlimited discussion, but ample discussion on the merits of the proposal. So do you have any questions?
Just one for our city manager. Comparables, essentially, for other communities kind of our size, are most of their command staff and the ones that have their own dedicated police departments, are they furnished
In at least 2 other communities that I'm aware of, Chelsea and Milan, they are furnished a vehicle. In the previous contract, so our previous chief was afforded the opportunity for a vehicle. I don't believe that he ever took this city up on it.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions? Questions, Mr. Gearba?
Yeah, just two. Raise two questions. As Councilmember Seal just mentioned, all the expectations that were put on a deputy chief, that just raised that issue of, should we also be providing one to the deputy chief? How is he handling his at this point?
That I would have to follow up on that.
Okay. So where I'm looking at this is it's like, if we have that same expectation on our deputy chief as we have on our chief, this has a bigger discussion. But I do know that our current detective gets, what, $350 a month?
Yes.
So if we were to do something like that and make that a standard across the board for these type of positions, even though it's a little bit more than what we're proposing in total for the two, I'm trying to determine this fairness, whatever, or we're not going to do it at all. The other issue is, I'm asking the question of, what is our expectation of, as Councilmember Dillon mentioned, or Mayor Pro Tem Dillon mentioned, of monitoring like we're doing of all of our officers? And, as we're doing, we have GPS on all our devices, all our equipment, all that. How does that play out in this type of situation? Would we attempt to put something like that? on their-
No, if they were privately owned vehicles, we would not.
Okay. I'm just trying to understand the fairness that we're trying to do here and making
Yep.
sure that what we do as on our staff and on the sergeants or on the police officers, is the same thing we have expectation of the officers in charge. Thank you.
If there's no additional questions, there's a motion on the floor moved by Dillon, seconded by Gearba to acknowledge. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. Is there a motion now to renew or not to review the employment contract with Marlene Radzik?
I move to renew.
Moved by CO to renew. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Lesh. Is there additional discussion on the motion? Mayor Pro Tem Dillon.
Thank you. So again, there's a lot of moving parts to this, and I just want to make sure that we're talking it through. Now we've just opened the door to, will we be providing the same dollar amount to our deputy chief? And so understanding we have got vehicles out there, and I just want to understand what the expectation is, and maybe it's just that I have never seen data to understand how many times our police chief is using their personal vehicle to come to work off hours. And so maybe doing the math, the numbers would definitely be in favor of it. So I don't understand that piece of it. I'm just afraid to open the door to others wanting equal treatment. Mr. Gearbaugh definitely raised a point that I had not considered before, which is having the cameras in our vehicles and understanding if those vehicles are used, a personal vehicle, at a site that does not have all of the equipment in it, including cameras, is there a liability issue? And so understanding that aspect of it. And again, I just want to reiterate, it has nothing to do with the employee or the contract. It is just this issue that I want to make sure that we're looking long-term at.
Any additional discussion on the motion? Mr. Gearba?
Yeah, I'd like to make an amendment, and if it's not supported, that's fine, but it's the issue, I'd amend it to keep it the same dollar amount as the current detective and maximize the amount of any kind of such reimbursement to $350 a month.
Okay, well, first, try to entertain this as a friendly amendment. Mr. CO, do you accept that as a friendly amendment or no?
I'm sorry, you said what again?
Mr. Gearba, repeat your suggestion or repeat your
I'd like to
amendment.
change the dollar amount to $350 instead of $450, being consistent with the detective.
To $250 instead of
Three-
$350?
It's currently proposed at $450 a month.
Oh.
I'm proposing the $350 that currently the detective gets, and that would be a max that we would allow for any situation like this.
I don't know, I've not been involved in the discussions between the chief and the city manager, so I guess if my motion fails, you could make a motion of your own.
Well, he wants to amend the motion.
I understand.
Yeah,
I'm just saying I'd rather stick with my motion.
okay. So,
If that fails, then he can make a
So I'm
motion.
making a formal amendment to.
yep, so Mr. Gearba is making then a formal amendment, which we'll vote on first, to modify the dollar amount to $350. Is there a second to that amendment? One more time, is there a second to the amendment? Then the amendment fails. Back to considering the motion on the floor, which is a motion to renew or not to renew. Is there any additional discussion? Let me just say, I will be voting in favor of the motion to renew. This is important, but it is still one relatively small aspect of a larger employment contract. I do want to state, though, for the record, with the greatest respect, we might have a slight philosophical difference. I'm actually long-term probably more amenable to providing a vehicle to the police, perhaps a surplus vehicle that's no longer used as a patrol vehicle, or maybe some other unit within our fleet. It's not only my understanding that the city of Milan and Chelsea provide their chief with an appropriately equipped vehicle, but larger municipalities in our area do as well. I think Ann Arbor and I believe Ypsi, in addition to the two that I just named. So I would like that suggestion, I guess for lack of a better way to articulate it, evaluated more in the next 12 months, and maybe we can have a more focused discussion and review a bit more hard data, if you will, a year from now. But I think this contract as written is sufficient. I've said this ad nauseum on other issues in the past. It's not perfect. There's no issue there's no solution or remedy that is, but I think in its totality, it is a well-vetted, good contract. And I think the chief is doing a wonderful job, and I would like to see her continue to be employed here as our chief through June 2026. Any additional discussion? Mr. Gearbon.
I believe that had we had this contract the 90 days prior to it, we would have had a better discussion on this. Could have brought this to attention. Unfortunately, we received it 2 weeks after the contract had expired. So going forward, I think clearly next year, this needs to be to us 90 days prior so that we can have a discussion.
Any additional discussion on the motion? Mayor Pro Tem Dillon, before we
Just for
vote.
clarification, this is a 2-year contract.
Correct, so you,
Excuse me.
yes,
Coming
yeah, it
back
would not be
12 months.
discussed next year.
But you could always amend a portion.
Yes, absolutely,
Contract, yeah.
absolutely, but the formal contract would not come up for consideration until 90 days before June 30th of 2026.
Again, it would be a request of council. I don't know
Yeah.
how the majority feels, but I would like the issue of an official dedicated city vehicle evaluated in the next 12 months. If there's no additional discussion, we have a motion on the floor moved by CO, seconded.
I have a clarification. I just want to make sure I understand this. So if we move to approve this, then we're basically committing to the chief purchasing their own personally equipped vehicle that is not necessarily safety equipped with the proper equipment to go on calls for 2 years? Is that what we're approving? I just want to make sure that we're clear on that. That's what we're approving.
Yes, you are providing the chief a stipend to use a personally owned vehicle, however she chooses to meet that requirement for all response purposes.
And there's nothing on the table currently to provide a vehicle that's issued by the city?
I
Not a
believe that's
take-home
what, I believe that's what Mayor Marl expressed had been his preference.
And I would second that preference.
Has to be obviously evaluated further. We'd have to identify a vehicle or acquire a vehicle and then appropriately outfit said vehicle.
So I guess it would be good to know the position of the rest of council, because now I think I've got 4 different possible scenarios for this contract. Then, knowing that this is now written as a 2-year contract, do you want it to be a shorter term so that it can be evaluated further? Do you want to put this on pause again? Again, knowing this is not in any way holding up her pay increase. That's all standardized as part of our merit pay system that you all adopted by resolution. But obviously, the employee would like clarity on whether, there are any issues.
I understand that the individual can continue to work here without a contract, but I like to put myself in those shoes in that office. I would want a contract. I wouldn't want this issue to continue to linger, nor would I want my elected officials to dither on these issues in perpetuity. So again, I don't think the contract is perfect. Again, nothing is, but I think it's good enough to vote in favor of this evening. My personal preference was I'd like the issue of a city-issued take-home vehicle that would be appropriately equipped evaluated in the next 12 months, and for this body and staff to consider making some adjustments in 2025. But that's my perspective. It may or may not be shared by the rest of the group. Let me start at the end. I'll get everybody here. Councilmember Harmont, was that your perspective as well?
My perspective, I'm just concerned about the timing, because if she were to go and purchase her own vehicle, I'm still not clear what the requirements from a performance standpoint that vehicle is going to require. Like, if is she going to be going on calls that would put her in a safety issue, and then therefore purchasing a vehicle off the shelf at a dealership is not going to meet the requirements that would be required for that type of call. And $450 is not going to get a vehicle that's equipped to make those type of calls.
So there would be no obligation to outfit herself with a vehicle that meets existing police vehicle standards. In all likelihood, I imagine she would just continue to use her existing vehicle and show up on scene with that vehicle. That is ultimately the employee's discretion, though. The city would not, under the current contract, the city does not have any specific requirements for the performance expectations of the vehicle.
Mr. Gearbaugh, thoughts on I guess before we vote on the motion on the floor to renew or not to renew, city manager would like some clarification on the long-term consensus of this body to provide the police chief with a city-issued appropriately equipped vehicle.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I understand the question. My concern, though, is I would not go with a 2-year contract. You cannot change that contract. That's just not a thing to do. That's just poor contract agreement approach. If you're going to do it, you do it for 12 months and then make the determination at that 12 months whether to continue the stipend at that point. But I'm not going to fight over $100 at this point. My bigger concern, as I've expressed, is this issue of the expectations that we have of one individual versus another, and monitoring. If we're going to be the idea that we're going to have GPS devices in our vehicles, we're going to have cameras and all that stuff, at what point do we have the expectation that the chief is subject to the exact same kind of requirements? And being in a private vehicle that's not equipped with any of those items or devices is going to raise that issue. But for this point, it's up to council.
Mayor Pro Tem Dillon?
Thank you. I think I've made my point clear on this. I don't, from a safety standpoint, I don't think that using an off-the-shelf standard vehicle, I mean, she could roll up in a little Miata convertible to a scene, and it's not equipped with police access to information. And so that does raise a bit of concern for me. And again, I would like to, I'd rather have data to understand if there's a need, and understanding how many times that this vehicle is being used. I think, as the mayor explained, I would rather see, especially our chief officer in a uniform, in a police car. I think showing that leadership to the role when they're at sites. So that's one of the big things for me, is understanding that aspect of it. I absolutely agree with Mr. Gearbaugh that if we are looking at changing things in 12 months, it needs to be a 12-month contract. Having a 2-year contract and looking to do a reopener in 12 months is not fair to the employee. So that's going to be an issue as to if that's what the body wants to do, is do a short-term car allowance with a look back and a renegotiation in 12 months, then that might be the most amenable.
Mr. Seal?
Having been there and done that, both with my own personal vehicle and with the city-provided vehicle, the only real difference is whether or not there's a light, siren, and radio integrated into the vehicle. The Ford sedan I had was certainly not equipped with the same kind of suspension that a normal patrol car is. But bearing that in mind, I didn't engage in high-speed chases either. Same thing, if you have your own personal vehicle, you can easily stay in touch with a portable radio. The portable radios we have these days that we furnish to the police are just as good as an in-car radio. Back when I first came on police department back in the 1970s, the portables were large and bulky, and most people didn't carry them. Now they're small, they're compact, and they definitely can provide adequate communication service. Knowing that the vehicle doesn't have a light and siren in it, you park and act accordingly. You don't engage in high-speed chase. You don't speed to a scene. You go at a normal speed, And then when you get there, if you need to park in traffic, like I say, you can use one of those portable red lights that sticks to the roof with a magnet and is perfectly adequate. I think people pretty well understand that. Also, the chief is certainly smart enough and been in traffic enough to know that she doesn't want to expose herself to, unwanted or unwarranted dangers. So I'm sure if she responded to a scene, she'd park, if she had her own car or a personal car, park out of the way of traffic in a safe spot. So I don't think there's any real need to provide her with a suitably equipped, quote unquote, police vehicle.
Very good. Mr. Lesh?
I concur with Councilmember CEO that the important thing is getting the command staff on site at the site of an incident, that they're not going to be doing high-speed pursuit to get there, except to get the chief there to direct her officers.
Okay, we can proceed, of course, with the motion on the floor. There has been the suggestion made from the dais, which I would probably be amenable to. Understanding my history as chair is, I always start from the point of wanting to build broad coalitions and get near unanimous support for big substantive issues that pertain to the quality of life in the city of Saline. So I don't know. There appears to be some desire to do a further evaluation on a city-issued, appropriately equipped vehicle, and to maybe do that in a shorter period of time, i.e. 12 months instead of the 24 that would be enumerated or implied, rather, within the motion. But it's the consent of council. Is there a desire to vote, or would there like to be, would you like to consider some additional amendments to the motion? Mayor Pro Tem Dillon.
I would make a motion to amend the contract to a one-year contract, and I'd have to look to the dates with the terms as is.
It would be June 30th of 2025 then.
And would that be with the understanding then that in that one-year period, staff would evaluate and vet and make a formal recommendation regarding a city-issued vehicle to the police chief?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Sear, would you accept that as a friendly amendment or not?
Yeah.
Okay, you would. Mr. Lesh, would you accept that as a friendly amendment? Okay, we're going to be a little bit casual with this. Everyone clear then on what the amendment is? All right, so Mayor Pro Dillon has offered some additional language which the mover and seconder have accepted, which would modify the contract to a one-year period ending, did you say June 30th, 2025?
Correct.
Okay, with the understanding that staff, specifically the city manager's office, would vet and evaluate issuing the police chief with a city-issued car and make a recommendation sometime before the expiration of said contract. Are you clear on that, City Manager O'Toole?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any additional discussion on the motion?
Just
Mr. Gearbaugh.
one clarification, liability. You've talked about liability being a city vehicle and everything. How does our liability play out now with the expectation that we want an individual to come to in a private vehicle to an emergency situation where potentially there's an expectation that they will be there,
So liability for
the city?
damage or?
Yeah, city, if damage or should an accident occur on that, and the issue is that if there's somebody involved in an accident,
So
I'm like, what's the difference
obviously,
between
obviously, I'll
liabilities?
ultimately defer to our legal counsel on this. My experience has been in issues where you are driving your personal vehicle for business purposes, you would be covered under workers' compensation if you were injured during that time. Whether your vehicle is covered depends on the nature of it, if it's a normal transit or not, or an expectation of normal transit. If I was driving to and from my home to a conference and got into an accident, you may not be liable for the actual vehicle, but it could be liable for workers' compensation. Again, though, that's just, I have one isolated experience with that.
The other aspect would be is whether you're at fault and the individual that's injured in that becomes an injured party.
Oh, and the city becomes liable.
Does the city become liable on that too?
Do you want to, I think it's a valid question, do you want to refer that to legal counsel and maybe
Yes.
communicate a response in your upcoming weekly communique?
Yes,
Very
no
good.
problem.
Any additional comments or discussion on the motion? Everyone clear on the modified motion? Okay. It's been moved by CO, seconded by Lesh to approve, noting the modified language. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 24-150, Asset Management Subcommittee. This is a motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo from City Manager O'Toole to establish or not establish an Asset Management Subcommittee and to approve or not to approve the guidelines for the Asset Management Subcommittee.
Move to establish and to approve.
Move to establish and approve by Mr. Gearba. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Dillon. City Manager O'Toole, would you like to make some brief comments for the public's benefit?
Yes, so in speaking with the existing Water Wastewater Ad Hoc Committee, it was pretty well received by the group that we should make a move to forming an official subcommittee to look holistically at asset management. And the reason for this is that often we are talking most importantly about water and sewer services, but there's a lot of connectivity between those projects and other happenings within the city. And frankly, we have that team together, so it's natural that discussions occur. This group would still be focused on primarily water and sewer projects, but the hope is that by bringing in 1 or 2 additional council members, we can start to lay additional groundwork, educate council on projects that are coming in the future, the need for them, and frankly, continue to develop what we're all pushing for on staff, which is for you to also be asset management champions and, see the value in working on preventative maintenance and right fix at the right time.
Okay. Before I defer to Mr. Gearba, who's been our longstanding council member, or council representative, on the Water, Wastewater Ad Hoc Committee, based on the comments you just made in the conversation we had last week when we were prepping for tonight's meeting, so you're looking for 1 to 2 additional council members to serve on this group, along with yourself, Mr. Briggs, I believe City Engineer Humphreys obviously attends.
Yep.
And participates. And then Mr. Rubel is there on occasion, I believe, from Tetra Tech, is that correct?
We only
invite him.
invite him as needed,
Okay.
not.
On an as-needed basis.
Yeah.
And then there are 2.
Director Searles.
Director Searles.
And then 2
private
residents.
citizens.
Yep.
Okay. And my apologies. So between now and our next meeting, assuming the motion to establish and approve is approved by council, we need written communiques from anybody on council to your office and I would suspect mine,
Correct.
confirming interest in serving on this group because we want to formalize those appointments at our next meeting, which I believe, is that on the 19th? Yes, it is.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Gearba, any comments that you have as a member of the existing water, wastewater team?
No, I think this is a good move forward this way. We have anticipated, and right now we have 2, very involved citizens that have background and such that would help contribute to a number of these issues. And hoping that moving this forward this way will get more members of council to be very much abreast of what's happening, as much as I am, which, it's difficult to transpose all that information as much as we need to have it as a council member, and going forward, this will help.
Can, City Manager O'Toole, can you remind me, or perhaps Mr. Gearba, how often does this group meet and what day of the week and what time of the day?
We meet once a month. It is 8 a.m. on a Friday. I can't recall. I think it's the second Friday.
There have been occasions where there have been 2 meetings a month. Am I correct?
Yeah, we used to do it
When the group was
bi-weekly,
originally
but-
formed, before we had the rehabilitation plan for the wastewater treatment plant, yes.
Okay.
At this point, I think we've settled into a very nice
So
once per
basically,
month
1 meeting a
routine.
month, 8 a.m. on which?
second Friday of the
Second
month.
Friday. And meetings generally last hour and a
About an
half?
hour, yeah.
All right, very good. So again, if you're interested in serving in that capacity, along with Mr. Gearba and the individuals previously mentioned, please email my office and city manager's office. It would actually have to be in advance of the 19th because the support materials for that meeting will go out on the 14th. So you have really until the close of business on the 13th, a week from tomorrow. Are there any questions or comments for the city manager regarding this proposal? Mayor Pro Tem Dillon.
Thank you. Just a couple quick questions, sort of more housekeeping. One of the things that I've had a conversation with the city manager about recently was on these subcommittees. I think it's very important that we understand, and it's not going to work for everybody, but that these committees really need to meet during the day for staff to be participating. Asking staff to constantly stay after for all of these new subcommittees that we have, in addition to their larger committees that they're already on, is very taxing for them and very expensive for the city to pay overtime. So I think we're going to have to figure that out, and I know that we've always been very flexible with it in offering phone-in opportunities and things like that. So for those that work, I want to make sure that they kind of get first bite at the apple as to what committees kind of work with their other work schedules. So I want to make sure that we give them that opportunity. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that, so if we're looking at adding 2 council members to this, then we've got their 3. And then when you start adding, because I've noticed this is the issue too with like policy and finance subcommittees, that we've sort of made the mayor ex officio, but to be honest, for him to be able to attend a meeting, even to pop in, requires notice, advanced planning, things like that. So is having a 3rd council member there, you know, the avenue, the direction that we want to go so that the mayor can be included in on these meetings? Or is it just to understand how he's going to be looped into things? Or if it's just that he's, you know, there in spirit and that the group is going to, you know, I just want to understand what that role is, because I think it's going to be very confusing to have that ex officio popping in, popping out at times.
I don't think we ever established with the previous water wastewater group, nor would it be my recommendation with this group, that the mayor be included as an ex officio.
Correct. I don't believe that you
Okay.
are.
But it-
But
We
it
have
is
invited,
the other committee that we
the existing
created.
ad hoc has had an open invitation to any council member that did want to attend. obviously
council did
subject-
establish the mayor's position as an ex officio on both finance and policy, but the point would be, this would be true for both the mayor and any member of council who's not on those subcommittees. If you want to attend, if you're not on policy and you want to attend policy, or you're, want to attend finance and you're not on finance, you're welcome to do so. You just need to make contact with the city clerk's office in advance of that meeting, so we post it 18 hours before the scheduled meeting to comply with the Open Meetings Act standards, which can be done.
Okay. And then my other question is, when I looked at the membership on the guidelines document, it talks about that council members can only serve on no more than 2 subcommittees. So kind of understanding, well, we've already got a policy or finance, so that's our 1. And now we've created another committee earlier tonight. Now we're creating this one. And then is there something else coming down? Just for continuity, I don't know that, is that limitation? Because there are going to be people that aren't going to be available to meet.
Yes.
So I want to make sure that we're not,
So assuming this is approved tonight, subsequent action on the 19th, I'll also have revisions to the guidelines for both of those other policies to remove that stipulation, obviously.
I would make note, though, because sometimes people are confused on this point. We establish or have established 4 different entities, subcommittees, which are essentially subsidiaries of this body.
Yep.
So policy, finance, and now an asset management subcommittee. We have our normal boards and commissions. We have task forces, which usually are finite and limited in scope, but involve public engagement and public interfacing. And then earlier tonight, we had a working group, which is also finite and limited in scope, but generally isn't as, it's
More
not a requirement
operational.
or imperative that they do as much public interfacing or meet in a public open session. So just want to be clear, because there is a distinction between the entities that we have established and approved in the past. Any additional questions? Mr. Gearbaugh?
Just curious, there isn't any conflict with our fire board appointment and somebody being on these policies commitments? Remember, or is it only a private citizen that has that issue?
That would only be the private citizen. I can reread the contract, but doesn't apply to the elected, I believe.
Okay. You just check on that. I
Yeah.
just want to make sure that we don't end up causing a problem.
Well, that would be true for any board or commission then, if that were the case.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Yeah.
a little worried about. Thanks.
Any additional discussion? We have a motion on the floor to establish and to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 24-151, resolution to approve charter ballot language, term of office, and council pay. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo from City Manager O'Toole and to adopt or not to adopt resolution 24-151.
Acknowledge to receipt and adopt.
Acknowledge and adopt, and that was moved by Councilmember Harmount. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by CO. City Manager O'Toole, do you care to make a brief comment?
I'm sorry, for the asset
No.
managers.
No,
Oh,
we,
oh,
Ballot language.
yep.
I'm sorry, I got completely lost in the
No,
agenda,
no.
guys. Thank you. I was
We
like, where are
approved the
we?
asset
There's a lot
management subcommittee. That was established and approved unanimously, noting, of course, that Councilmember Rice is absent. Now we've
Yes,
moved
okay.
on to 24-151. We have a motion by Harmount, seconded by CO to acknowledge and to adopt.
So as part of the recommendations of the Charter Review Working Group, a citizen and staff-led group made the recommendation that council consider at the November election a ballot initiative to extend the term length for council. Currently, council and the mayor serve a 2-year term. That is a bit of an anomaly in Michigan municipal government. 4 years is certainly more of a standard. That is the recommendation of that group, that the city consider moving to a 4-year term. There's also some language in this ballot proposal that simply brings us into line with our existing operations. So it removes that standard language about the amount that the mayor and council members are paid, and instead references the statutory ability we have to use a local officers compensation commission, which has been the standard practice of the city in the past to determine compensation for elected officials.
And this also moves council and the mayor to the gubernatorial and presidential cycle.
Correct. This
Because
moves,
of the odd
yes. So if,
odd year.
one, if council approves the ballot language tonight, it would go on the November ballot. If approved by voters, then in the 2025 election, council members elected at that time would serve a 3-year term, and in subsequent years, a 4-year term, again, so that it was on every even year. And again, as we know, voter participation in those even years or during major state and federal elections is much higher and largely more representative of the community.
The issue with pay is innocuous. That makes perfect sense. I am supportive of this. I don't feel as strongly about the transition from 2 years to 4 years, but I'm supportive of 4 years. I do feel very strongly that it's very advantageous for us to get off the odd election year cycle for city council. That's a burden and a cost on the city, specifically to the clerk's office. And oftentimes, the city council race is the only thing on the ballot, and we're attracting a very small portion of our electorate. And I think the long-term goal and benefit of getting it to the even year, the gubernatorial and presidential cycle, is a much broader swath of our city votes. And I think that's good. And I think you want to see that level of participation for local races, specifically city council as well. Are there questions for the city manager? Well, before I get entertaining questions, Mr. Gearbaugh, you are the representative for the Charter Review Working Group. Are there any comments you'd like to make at this time?
Not really that are more relevant than what was just been mentioned, except that this always comes up approximately every 20 years, and I know at least 2 elections where this was recommended and was voted down. So moving forward, I think the realization is that it's a cost-saving move, and if we can do that, that's probably the biggest benefit of this.
Very good. Any additional questions or comments? Mayor Pro Tem Dillon.
Thank you. First, I'm just going to start with a quick statement because there was an issue on social media today that this issue is not on the ballot tomorrow, just to clarify that. There was a lot of confusion caused by a statement that was made on social media about that. City Manager, my question for you is, why is it not, because this is another question that's coming up, why are the people that are on the ballot this year not subject to this? Why would it not be the people that, like the mayor and the 3 council members that are
So
up
that are up for election
this year?
in November?
Right.
I could ask legal for clarification on that. I presume it has more to do just with not knowing the outcome at that point. So
don't think you're gonna
people
apply.
not being able to know at that point, am I electing someone for a 2 or a 4-year term?
Go ahead.
When I was at the city of Chelsea, we did this for our going from a village to a city, and we had to appoint people for the village and the city in case the city didn't pass. So you would have to have 2 separate ballots, even though there's the same people on both ballots saying a 2-year term or a 4-year term.
Okay. It's a question that's come up, and there was some question about that the people that were up for reelection this year were controlling the narrative, that we were choosing not to be a part of this. I'm
Yeah,
just
no,
making a
there's,
statement
yes,
of
there's,
what was
this
said.
is purely for legal and well, common sense purposes.
And when, obviously, when the ballot it's essentially been established, just not printed, it states a 2-year term, electing a mayor and city council member to a 2-year term, beginning in 2025 and ending in 2026, December. Any other questions, Mayor Pro Tem Dillon?
No.
Okay. Is there any additional discussion on the motion? Okay, we have a motion on the floor moved by Harmount, seconded by CO to acknowledge and to adopt. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 24-152, ordinance number 867, flexibility with industrial building design standards. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt from the memo from Community Development Director Harrington and to adopt or not to adopt ordinance number 867.
Move to acknowledge and adopt.
Moved by Lesh to acknowledge and to adopt. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by CO. Mr. Harrington.
This is one of the first ordinances that really worked its way through the new policy subcommittee process, but it actually originated from the Zoning Board of Appeals. Earlier this year, they gave out 2 variances for the industrial building design materials. It's not really a good remedy for things that are aesthetic. Variances are really about practical hardship with a specific property. The idea being that the first criteria that you can't use the property for something else without getting this variance. And that's often not the case with aesthetics. You're really looking at, is it practical, is it feasible, is it financially attainable? In other cities, first criteria for variances is a little bit more relaxed than ours and speaks more to that, but ours doesn't, and I honestly prefer it that way. I think that the best option for the city is to allow discretion to determine practicality with industrial building materials, whether it needs to be 80% sheet metal or if it could be 82, or maybe it would be better as 90. Really on a case-by-case basis, evaluating the site, evaluating the fitness with the surrounding neighborhoods, and that's really the role of the Planning Commission already within the community, much more so than the ZBA kind of bending the definition of a variance to accommodate something that was really impractical in those 2 instances they looked at. ZBA asked the Planning Commission to review it. The Planning Commission was comfortable absorbing this level of deference that they're given for things like off-street parking already, and then it went to the policy subcommittee, all 3 groups kind of unanimously supporting this very small revision in our ordinance that essentially gives the Planning Commission deference to allow a little bit more of a certain type of building material on a specific side of a building, whether that's the front, the side, or the rear.
Very good. Councilmember Lesh, as the chair of the council policy subcommittee, is there any statement that you'd like to make at this time?
I believe that Community Director Harrington did a good job in vetting the responses from our members on the policy subcommittee, and I think we're in total agreement with his recommendations.
Passed unanimously at the policy subcommittee level?
Yes.
Very good. Are there questions for Mr. Harrington? Any discussion on the motion? Mr. Seal.
Just a question. When you leave it to the Planning Commission to make exceptions of the exercising their own judgment, does that open us to an objective kind of a decision-making process that could be criticized or even later subject to lawsuit?
Yeah, it was one of the things we looked at is would it be better to just remove the percentage standards altogether? So one of the ideas, because currently we have a table of percentages that break down the material that you can use. That's kind of the trick case with anything that's aesthetic inherently. This requires that the Planning Commission provides some level of finding of fact, that we're permitting this deviation because it's so obscured from the street. In the case of Liebherr that received one of these variances, the facade that we were looking at didn't even face a public road. It was facing their own site, really. So do we really care? And what the city could then establish, okay, well, it's not visible from the street. And you kind of create conditions similar to how you create a finding of fact for a variance, just in a little bit different of a context here. So to answer your question, it's not perfect. We could obviously, if the Planning Commission really indiscriminately and inconsistently provides a remedy to some folks and not to others, yes, but that's the case with any of the reviews that the Planning Commission or the council do. So it's just a matter of being reasonable more than anything else.
Thank you.
Mr. Gearbaugh?
And that was kind of the concern that I had was that it becomes more of a staff assessment, and then comes the planning. But to have it go to the ZBA for something that the ZBA really isn't abreast of from their own perspective, they don't really have the information behind it, is just another step that basically just drags out an approval process. The hope on this one really comes back as to the expectations from planning and staff and making sure we get more clarity on that so that we don't have a potential where a developer comes in and wants to build a building with the cheapest materials that is an eyesore. And luckily for the Sauk Trail Park, we have covenants that are still in place there that require some aesthetic reviews and things. It's just that issue of it's really becomes more dependent on planning, being aware of what is there and what we're doing, so.
Right. I would add, too, that the ordinance requires them to meet it. I mean, you don't get to just say, I'm not meeting it and propose whatever you want. I mean, that it would be called out by staff. You're literally asking for an exception to deviate from that table. I think part of the challenge, though, is, too, like, you know, if someone's asking for 82%, that's obviously very different than asking for 100. You know, the factors and why they might need that extra percentage point is when the ordinance becomes a little bit more arbitrary versus we're still trying to get them to meet the general intent of the ordinance, which is to not have a very pale, blank facade, especially one that faces a public street, especially one that's made with poor materials and things of that nature.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
Please,
Just-
Councilmember Harmon.
Just to reiterate, to clarify, so deviation for the standard would not pose any increased risk to the community?
No more so than having it go to a variance. I would say our current remedy process is not fantastic and probably poses more risk. This allows us to still exercise some degree of discretion without being very arbitrary that, you know, again, that you're held to this very specific percentage or less. But again, no, our legal reviewed this and took no issue with it.
Okay.
Any additional comments or questions? Discussion on the motion. We have a motion on the floor then moved by Lesh, seconded by CO to acknowledge and to adopt. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to agenda item 24-153, ordinance number 869, Planned Unit Development Standards. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo from Community Development Director Harrington and to adopt or not to adopt ordinance number 869.
Move to acknowledge and adopt.
Moved again by Lesh to acknowledge and to adopt. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded this time by Gearbaugh. Again, city manager, or excuse me, you'd make a very good city manager, not to impugn our existing city manager, but Community Development Director Harrington. Do you have any comments on this item?
I just got promoted, I think. Maybe I'm not moving after all.
Trying to find a way for you to stay.
So the PUD ordinance is being proposed to be updated. It was written by Carlisle Wortman and Associates, again, reviewed by our legal department. This was an item specifically identified in the implementation table of our master plan, was to audit these standards and then to recommend updates. Currently, our PUD standards, for those of you who aren't familiar, a PUD is a planned unit development. It essentially is a build-your-own zoning. So when you're looking to put in a new subdivision in the community, you're asking for bulk exceptions from our very rigid setbacks and lot size standards that were set in many cases 40 to 50 years ago and maybe not reflect the modern development patterns that folks want out of their homes, what's financially feasible or what's even most sustainable for the environment. So the PUD allows developers to ask for bulk exceptions. It's one remedy to some of the problems we're currently having with development in the city and their sprawl-like nature. But ultimately, the city's still going to have to investigate other code fixes to allow more by right types of development, because this is a pretty arduous process for somebody to go through versus the ability to, you know, have a very simple site plan review. For PUDs, though, our ordinance is pretty restrictive. It's already asking for exceptions, but then we're limiting to the exceptions of what they can ask for. So one of our requirements is 40% open space, which is not something we ask of other developments, but something we ask of anyone asking to get exceptions from our zoning. So, and their ability to ask for flexibility, they're then additionally constrained. And then we also cap density as the underlying units per acre. So for single-family development, that's based off of lot size, which our smallest lot is 7,800 square feet, which is about 1/6 of an acre. So you're permitted up to 6 units per acre, and then our multifamily, it's a little bit larger. But again, and their ability to ask for this flexibility to kind of get them out of this zoning code that was written primarily 40 or 50 years ago, we're now, again, constraining them back to it. The only loser in this situation, in my opinion, is the city of Saline, because we're not able to listen to their proposal. This doesn't guarantee that you have to approve something that's, 50 units per acre, but it allows a developer to have an earnest conversation with the city over what we're comfortable with and whether or not we would approve it. And similar to the question about industrial design standards, provided that you're consistent, that you're reviewing the contents of the master plan, which is what our planning consultant does whenever we have a PUD development, which we will have at the next planning commission meeting as well. Provided that we're consistent with what the intent of that plan is, we should be able to listen to somebody's proposal and to be able to hear them out on what they want to say and what they want to show the city. But you don't have to approve it. I mean, there's no obligation to approve anything. So again, this just provides developers the ability to ask the city for more exceptions from our zoning code. to test the waters and see what you're interested in, but the city doesn't lose any footing on, you have to be compatible with the surrounding area. You have to meet the intent of the master plan, which I would say is still, not promoting to build high rises anywhere by any stretch of the imagination. Those are pretty limited areas we're looking at for dense multifamily. But this will also allow developments that are looking to add townhomes or row houses, similar to many of the condo developments we've had around the city, mixed in with the products that we're seeing at Bella Terrace or Huntington Woods, or what Andalina Farms is building. So it would allow for a higher type of housing diversity with some of the constraints were lifted that we're needlessly restricting people to.
Very good. Thank you for that. Councilmember Lesh is the chair of the policy committee. Anything you'd like to add at this time?
Again, it was brought before us. Mayor Pro Tem Dillon actually asked some very good questions during that session, going over that one, but we came to unanimous agreement that it would be in the best interest of the city to change this.
Very good. Questions for the Community Development Director? Mayor Pro Tem Dillon?
Sure, just one quick question for Mr. Harrington, actually more of a statement. Just for public edification, can you just clarify when you refer to it gives the city more, latitude in doing things, are you meaning staff, planning, or council?
Really, the latitude is in the review of the we can now see projects we were essentially telling people we wouldn't even look at. So the PUD is a tool to add flexibility, and we were then constraining the flexibility of that tool. So we're saying, no, we can't look at your proposal. You have to work it down before it even gets to us to meet this level of density. Again, that was established a very long time ago, or meet these lot standards, or meet this open space provision, which often ends up in HOAs owning green space they don't do anything with, which becomes a problem in and of itself for other reasons, especially when I have to do tall grass and weeds. So,
No, thank you very much. Like I said, it was just more of just understanding that clarification.
Very good. Mr. Gearbaugh?
Just kind of a comment on this. This was actually requested from planning almost 2 years ago, or a little more, because we realized that even that requirement of 40% green space really limited us. When Maple Oaks was being developed, they were trying to squeeze out every little spot to try and count as green space, and technically, there may be some green space counting that wasn't there. This at least gives us, as Mr. Herring said, these abilities to look at something that we've never looked at before, and something that actually would be more probably amenable in our community at this time than we have in the past. The other part of it is just that if we want to move forward on some of these other big developments and have some new ideas, I think this needs to be in place, especially if we talk small housing, tiny home, that kind of stuff. This will give that ability.
Very good. Thank you for those comments. Any additional comments or questions?
I have one. I think maybe when folks hear this, they might be a little bit afraid that this would open the door to having high-density apartments moving into residential areas like the Fairdine project. And I just want to make sure to put people's at rest, that would not be the case again, that it's just opening kind of the widening, the spread of what we will get a chance to take a look at, not necessarily approve.
Right, that's absolutely right. So similar to the Fairdine project that was proposed to be built within the density requirements ultimately of that district. There was nothing prohibiting them from showing you that, and in theory, there was nothing prohibiting you from denying them that for a latitude of reasons. And the same with this, like you could deny people for all sorts of reasons. I don't want people to think we're taking away green space or anything of that. Ultimately, we're allowing people to just show us something a little bit different, but you have to provide, stormwater retention, which often takes up a great amount of land. You have to provide, yard space likely, because that's what our master plan says a city density residential property has, which is that kind of medium density we're talking about, is some degree of yard. I mean, the plan was written with very much these ideas in mind of we're looking for a specific type of form more than an arbitrary cap. But that form is still what we really like. I mean, that's why it was written with form in mind, is we're trying to see the city develop in a specific way, not so much tying people to very specific arbitrary numbers.
Very good. Any additional comments or questions, discussion on this motion? Then we have a motion on the floor moved again by Lesh, seconded by Gearbaugh to acknowledge and to adopt. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to new business item 24-154, resolution number 24-154, 7911 East Michigan Avenue annexation. This is a motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo from City Manager O'Toole and to acknowledge the certain nonconformities under Article 15 of the zoning ordinance and to adopt or not to adopt ordinance number 24-154, just to subject to the condition that any alterations, changes in ownership, or changes in use of the building shall necessitate that existing signage come into conformity with City of Saline standards.
Move to acknowledge, and to adopt.
I'll second.
All righty, it's been moved by Gearbaugh, seconded by CO to acknowledge, and to adopt. City Manager O'Toole, would you like to make some comments?
Certainly. So the property owner of 7911 East Michigan Avenue has properly filed for an annexation request. The city has a longstanding agreement with Pittsfield Township regarding certain island properties that were township and are now completely surrounded or are largely surrounded by city jurisdiction, this being one of them. So the 425 agreement is already in place. That allows us to streamline this process through adoption of a resolution whenever we receive those annexation requests. Having gone through the process, it does meet all the criteria for annexation to the Office of the Great Seal. That would be the next step if this resolution is adopted. As Attorney Schmerberg mentioned during his public comment, there are certain conditions. Obviously, when you bring a parcel, an existingly developed parcel, into the city's jurisdiction, it comes with certain conditions that exist at the time. Similar to how we currently handle existing legal nonconforming uses, the majority of those issues would be covered under that section of our ordinance, while one specific issue, that being the temporary signage that on site, we are making a specific condition for within this motion.
Very good. Are there questions for the city manager? And of course, you may also direct questions to the legal representative representing the proprietor owner of 7911 East Michigan Ave. Any questions, comments from the dais? Mr. Gearbaugh?
Can you clarify what the revenue sharing will be on this, similar to?
There's no revenue sharing under that 425 agreement.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Dillon, did you have a question? Didn't mean to put you on the spot if you don't.
No, thank you very much. My question was that this property is currently already serviced with water and sewer from the city.
Correct.
And just for clarification, when we're referring to the sign, it is the portable sign
The portable sign.
that is on the property right
Yes.
now. The standing sign is not in compliance and would not be utilized in the future. It's not a part of this, correct?
The standing sign would be treated the same as any other legal nonconforming use at this point. We're not going to require them to take down that post, but if they wanted to put signage up on it in the future, it would need to meet the existing standards at that time.
And my last question was about the signage, that the city has no control over the content of it,
Correct.
and it cannot change its form from where it is now.
Correct.
Any additional questions or comments? Mr. Schmerberg, we appreciate you being here tonight. Thank the applicant. It's a great Saline business, a long-standing Saline business. My family's been proud to patronize them. I had a flat tire just a month ago and luckily made my way out to Jerry's Tire before I had serious axle issues. But we're glad to have them in the city of Saline, and we appreciate your diligent work on this matter along with city staff.
Great. Thank you very much, everybody. And
If there's no additional discussion, who had a comment? I'm sorry.
I think Mr. Schmalberg.
I was just going to mention that now it's a great Saline business. It's been a great Pittsfield business for a while, but
Yeah.
now we
Great,
get to say they're a great
yeah,
Saline business.
now a great city of Saline business. Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Schmerberg.
Thank you.
We do have a motion on the floor to acknowledge, and to adopt. All those in favor of the annexation signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it, the motion carries unanimously. We move on to agenda item 24-155, adoption of the 2025 strategic plan. This will be a motion to acknowledge receipt of the memo from City Manager O'Toole and to adopt or not to adopt FY25 strategic plan.
Move to acknowledge and adopt.
Moved by CO to acknowledge and to adopt. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Harmount. City Manager O'Toole, some obligatory comments for the public record.
At this point, I believe we have what reflects our final plan based on numerous meetings over the last almost an entire year. I think about 10, 11 months we've been discussing this. So certainly welcome any fine-tuning or refining at this point, but hoping that the content is largely satisfactory.
Very good. And just for reference, I did do some pretty extensive messaging on our forthcoming strategic plan in my mid-year State of the City address. I will have a more comprehensive statement and thoughts to share at our subsequent meeting on August 19th, but I didn't want to get the cart before the horse here. I wanted to make sure the document was approved and thoroughly reviewed by council before I made any statements. So again, this is your last opportunity to do any wordsmithing or any substantive changes before we consider adoption. So are there any questions or changes that the group would like to consider? Mr. Gearbaugh.
As I mentioned to the city manager last week when we were discussing this a little bit, my one concern is under safety, which would be number, I think, 8. And I think we need to clarify, do we really need to number these? I don't want any idea that these are an order of.
Yes, they're not ordered. Frankly, the numbering system is more for me not to drive myself insane, trying to figure out which goal is tied to which timeline.
Okay. Just want to clarify that's really the truth. But if the one issue is on safety, and as you know, my one concern has been and will continue to be traffic enforcement. Not only trucks, speed, all of that, and as one of the goals, I believe that needs to become more effective. I'm looking at, today I just drove down South Ann Arbor Street, and 2 of my neighbors have put up the little signs with the kids and the flags in their lawn extension because traffic has become such a concern for pedestrians on that street. And I think the similar issue is when I'm on Michigan Avenue yesterday, gravel trucks blowing through the red lights. It's just to a point where safety is becoming a major concern in this community. So how we tie that into that goal 8 is one of my concerns, and I don't know if we've enumerated that or stated it to that effect. The other question I have is.
Let's stick with that for just a moment. I'm assuming you don't have any specific language that you wanted inserted. Did you draft a statement or any verbiage?
Or something to that
effect. Not that you needed to.
No, to some effect, however, we would add that or clarify it under the safety aspect. I think there really, truly needs to be, part of our strategic is to make sure, assuring that there is public safety, is assuring that adequate traffic enforcement is there.
Yeah, adequate traffic enforcement.
Thank you.
I believe that can be added under Goal 6 of Priority Area 8.
Okay, and I would assume there's no objection from the dais. That language can be added then without objection. Please continue, Mr. Gearbaugh.
And then the other one, just for myself, you've indicated that you had a dollar amount of $322,000 to basically implement this, whatever. How was that value determined, and where are those values? Did I miss something in?
No, they're not specifically highlighted in the final document, but happy to walk through really quickly some of the more big-ticket items. And that is the unbudgeted portion. The total cost is much larger, but that's because so much of this is just tied into existing operations and existing plans or a continuation of those existing plans. So within the document, Goal Area 2, foster open communication, we had not budgeted for expenditures related to the outside creation of a communications plan. Our estimate for that is a dollar figure of about $40,000. And I'll be clear, by approving the plan tonight, you're not approving these expenditures. Obviously, those all have to come with their own actions, but these are the big ticket items. Similarly, Goal 2, under that same category, there may or may not be a cost associated with us having a partner agency establish a third-party community calendar. Goal 3 of that area, we estimate a potential of $15,000 to $20,000 unbudgeted regarding a switch to a different community reporting tool. The existing tool is housed within our current website. To have a separate software would carry likely an additional cost.
Are there any specific, I don't have to have you go through the whole list, but are there any specifics in terms of new personnel or other aspects of that?
No, none of this calls for new personnel. Likely the other largest ticket items are more in response to outside consultant fees or professional services for plans or things like, for example, the site plan reviews that.
Got it, okay. Thank you, that's helpful.
Any additional questions or comments? Mayor Pro Tem Dillon.
Thank you. It's great to see this baby being born. I really appreciate all of the legwork that you did, and, you were really the champion for making a concise program, because that's where one of my comments is going to come from. It's nice to have a document that is the city's vision. It's not the staff vision, it's not a council, it doesn't matter who's sitting in these chairs, because I think that's one of the issues where there were certain aspects of things that we've had from previous staff members and things like that, which are initiatives that we started to go down the road of, but they were that person's priorities. And unfortunately, we've put money, time, and effort into those, and now trying to understand whether or not we want to kind of go back and explore, does it have a place in here? And by way of example is sort of that community policing mentality that had been brought forward, which was the cops walking the beat. There was a bicycle that was purchased. There was a whole, idea of the police are your friends. They're the people you go to when you need help, and getting people to understand that, and so not being afraid of the officers in uniforms and that sort of thing. It didn't quite make it in here, and so I didn't know, sort of how that fit in, if that was still a priority for us or not. Obviously, having a relationship, our police, with the community is always going to be a priority, but more of a deeper dive of that community policing mentality, and whether that was something.
So I would say to that point, the vision for this strategic plan is, this is the document that guides the predominant allocation of our resources, meaning both dollars and staff time. Certainly, other issues arise, emergencies occur, other priorities happen, we learn something new. It's not meant to fully detract from that process, but when we're making decisions about where our time and dollars are spent, these should be the top priorities. So if there is still something missing that you feel very passionately needs to be on that list, if it was bumped off, if we had to choose between X and Y, please let me know now. Otherwise, this will be the document that guides us into the future.
Right. And at any point, will we making, it's not like carved in stone, correct? We
Correct.
will kind of amend it as time goes on.
Yes, the plan specifically calls to be reviewed at least once annually.
Right.
Now, with the caveat being, it is not designed to be wholly reimagined every year annually. Really, these goals should be our driving force. These are the 8 things we've decided are our priority area, and it's going to take a good 4 to 5 years to see those visions come to full fruition, and we should allow that to grow.
No, absolutely, and I appreciate that. So I will tell you, for my quick, the top of my wish list to add to this would be our community element reporting tool. I don't feel as though the tool that we're currently using is user-friendly. I do think that we should prioritize. We keep telling people, please report when you have brown water, please report when there's an issue, this and that. Well, the current tool that we have is very clunky. It's not a user-friendly device. And so I think that we really should prioritize. If we want to get that feedback from people, we need to encourage them to do it in a way in which is easy for them to do it. And so, for me, that would become a priority. And I wasn't sure whether that fell under the communications aspect of it.
So, yes, we do have that specifically enumerated. So priority area 2, foster open communications, goal number 3 is prioritize implementation of an effective community reporting tool. That's within 1 year. The 2 action items under it are to determine the best product and then determine its ability to align with our work order system.
Right, and I understand that. I just wanted to make sure that, for me, it's definitely a priority, because I think that we need to be able to engage our community in things like that. So I appreciate that that's there and prioritizing it.
Yes, so I guess if there's any questions about the timeline associated with that or language changes, if you have those,
I don't know, within 1 year, I guess for me, understanding of what that means. Is it 1 year from today that we approve this? Is it, because I feel like we talked about that 6 months ago.
So
it was my assumption it was already in the works, and so if we haven't even started that aspect, waiting a full year seems like kind of a heavy lift.
So goal 1 underneath that, which is to identify the appropriate software and make that change, is March 31st. So, let's see, 7 months from now. And then implementation or integration with the work order system is by June 30th of 2025, so the end of the fiscal year.
Right. It just seems like if there's a way that could be escalated.
That's,
So,
if
I mean, I
you guys want to
understand
provide
that-
that direction, or?
And so, no, I'm just saying that, it's very difficult when we keep asking people, report it on the tool, and people are getting very frustrated because they try to report things, and it's like I said, it's not a user-friendly service right now. And so I don't know if there's something in the interim we can do, that we can modify what we have to make it more user-friendly. I don't know, but I just feel like it is that important of a thing right now. If we're trying to collect data, we need to have the data. And so unless the people are going to input it, then we're not going to have the accurate information.
Mr. Lesh, I believe you had a comment or question?
I just have a comment. I just wanted to compliment publicly our city manager for tracking and compiling all of this information, which I think Councilmember Harmouth and I have spent our entire council career so far working with the strategic plan, and it's nice to see it come together in such a nice document. So, well done.
Before we vote, I think this is great. Like Mr. Lesh, I applaud staff, specifically the city manager's office, for their work on this. We've had goals and objectives in the past. We've, as a body, have always met annually to establish said goals and objectives. But this document is far more specific and comprehensive. The approach is a pretty significant paradigm shift than what we've done historically. So while I think it's appropriate to review it on an annual basis because this is new, because this is fundamentally different than the way we've approached things in the past, I'd like a formal 6-month check-in, just to see how things are going. And to a point you made to Mayor Pro Tem Dillon, if there's adjustments or tweaks that need to be made, I would be amenable to doing them at that time. So just to establish a clear timeline, and again, it would be the prerogative of a majority of council, not just the mayor, but so 6 months from essentially today, and then an annual review as well.
So I will note, again, per the plan, there will be quarterly reports.
Okay.
So what I can plan to do is for that second quarterly report, maybe it would line up nicely, just do like a work session, a quick check-in with council.
Yep.
I think that would actually put us at about 5 months, if you're okay with that.
So basically, is that the,
Rather than us doing a second quarter report and then coming back a month later and
so
doing it.
sometime either right before or right after the holidays?
Correct, yep.
Which I think would be a great,
Probably in January.
Perfect time.
Because the
Yep.
quarter would close December.
and maybe it would be more conducive, if we're going to do something a little bit more thorough and thoughtful at the 5-6 month period, to do it at a workshop or a special meeting and to involve the key staff members who participated in the
Yes.
past. Okay. Very good. Unless there's anything further, go ahead.
I have a comment. We also talked about, when we're talking about status check-ins, to have actual KPI or milestones so that we know where we are at, and specifically Gantt-related items that line up to meeting or not meeting those milestones.
Yes, so that's the framework you see in this document with the strategic priorities, goals, and timelines will be what's built out. That'll be the starting point for us to develop the report that you'll see all on a quarterly basis. And I'm sure there'll be a little bit of a learning curve as we send out our first and second quarter reports to figure out whether it has the information you'd all like to see. But my goal is very much to have a very standardized process that all of this information fits into.
And also, I wanted to say thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Mr. Gearbob, before we vote?
And just one last, just for our clarification and make sure, because the major priority in this city, and has continued to be for the last 3 or 4 years, is water quality.
Yes.
Have we highlighted it, specified it, made it clear that that is our number one, and I'm going to say our number one issue to deal with, besides some of the other safety protocols and issues that we have going?
Yes, I mean, our number one, and again, these aren't in priority area, but I think the reason that it emerged as the number one priority area is effective asset management. And within that is a dedicated commitment to ensuring that we are enacting existing plans. We've spent a lot of time over the last 2 years specifically researching, studying, and gathering the information we need to lay the foundation for the future changes that are necessary to our system. And now is the time to invest in continuing to act on that. We've already made a major investment in the wastewater plant. The goal with the water plant and within our water system is to not wait until we are in a position where we have to make that level of investment, but to start seeing those plans come in today, doing the right thing when it needs to be done, and finding a way to continue to operate a system that is very old. we're all aware that many communities across the country have aging infrastructure as their number one problem. Saline's not unique in that regard, but I do feel very confident that our staff have put a lot of thought into, and the council members that were on that sub-area have put a lot of thought into the appropriate ways to prioritize.
And the rewards to make sure those results are coming will within this timeline or expectation, because I know the thing that I keep seeing is people still have concerns about water quality and things like that. How else do we communicate to them that we are investing, we are trying to do this? It's just, I think maybe whatever we do in terms, it comes back to that communication of providing that information when things are, there's a hiccup, I think, whatever, so.
Yeah, and I think that goes to the other strategic priority of the creation of the communications plan. I'm the first to admit I don't have any expertise in communications or marketing, so having some outside support in that regard would be very welcome.
Very good. We have a motion on the floor moved by CO, seconded by Harmount to acknowledge and to adopt. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes having the motion carries unanimously. The last action item of the evening is 24-157, high service pump quote. This is a motion to acknowledge receipt and to approve or not to approve the quote from Kennedy Industries in an amount of $29,990 for repair and reimbursement of high service pump number 2 and motor.
Move to acknowledge and to approve for refurbishment of the high service pump.
Did I miss, what did I say? What did I say?
Reimbursement.
Oh, excuse me, refurbishment, excuse me, my faux pas. Moved by Gearbaugh, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Lesh. Mr. Briggs, thank you for your patience this evening.
No problem. As a matter of fact, this kind of piggybacks on all your asset management thoughts. This is the second of the original 2 motors and pumps at the water plant to be refurbished. We already did pump 1 last year after we installed pump 3. So this is a move to get consistency and backup so that we are ensured that we don't run short of pumps and motors to move water for the city. This mainly comes to you because of the cost of it has to come before council for approval. Obviously, it's something that I desire, and I'm sure you guys desire to get completed as soon as we can. So that's why it was kind of last minute. I found out about this late last week, the actual amount for the bid. And so I figured I'd get it on the council and get it done, not have to wait a couple of weeks.
I appreciate you doing that. Thank you. Are there questions for Mr. Briggs? Mayor Pro Tem Dillon?
Thank you. Mr. Briggs, thank you very much. Can you just sort of clarify, what's the difference between repairing and refurbishing?
Well, it's, repairing would be like if the motor needs bearings, so that'd be a repair. The pump may not need repair, but maybe just a little touching up on the impeller and the volute, just kind of, a little wore down, just kind of maybe build it up a little bit. That'd be what I would consider refurbishment. So they're kind of 2 separate things, even though they kind of mesh together.
Right. And then what would the cost be? I mean, like, how many times can we refurbish something before it needs to be replaced?
Until the cost comes too close to buying a new one.
Okay.
The cost of a new one is probably at least double what we're getting this one repaired for.
Okay.
So, and they come, I have no problem with the work that Kennedy Industries does on, they've been doing this kind of work for years and years, and they're very good at making sure that the stuff is up to spec.
And are these like off-the-shelf pumps? Like, do we have a spare, like if one goes down?
We do not have a spare, but that's the idea, having 3 of them. Because at this point in time, most of the time, we only need 1. Sometimes we need 2. But so if one goes down, we have 2 others that can meet the demand while we get the 3rd one repaired if something happens to it. So that's why we're kind of getting redundancy built in.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Additional questions for Mr. Briggs? Discussion on the motion. Thank you, Bill. Appreciate it. It's been properly moved by Gearbaugh, seconded by Lesh to acknowledge and to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Ayes have it. The motion carries unanimously. We'll move on to reports and other announcements, including commission and committee updates. I'll start to my left and into my right. Councilmember Harmount, any public reports or commission committee updates?
I have none.
Mr. Gearbaugh.
Just a couple. The last planning meeting, we have finally did the final site of plan for Otto's, the Arcade Museum, or how we want to call it, which is moving forward. That's the redesigned Otto's old former cheese shop, frame shop building. I would also like to invite everyone to the Runschler Farm for the annual US 12 yard sale, which will be on Friday and Saturday of this week. And of course, it runs in correspondence with Summerfest, which I know all of us will probably be attending. And then lastly, we did approve at our last HDC meeting, a fence and such in the back, but we have a meeting this week, and it's to review a former request that had not been approved because we did not have a quorum.
Very good. I would note, too, we have some vacancies on HDC and our Environmental Commission, along with a few other boards and commissions. So if you know of anybody who would be interested or who has an expertise that would benefit those bodies, please have them fill out the application online. I'd like to get some of those vacancies filled either on the 19th or at our first meeting in September. I'd also like to take this opportunity, although it's sort of bittersweet, to thank and congratulate Mr. Harrington on a very successful tenure with the city of Saline. And I'm sure he will be, he'll do phenomenal things at the city of Little Canada in Minnesota, and their gain is our loss. So best wishes to you, and thank you for your service to the city of Saline. It's very much appreciated by myself, council, staff, and all of the citizens, especially those who had an opportunity to interface with you over these past 2 years.
Thank you, Ben.
Mayor Pro Tem Dillon, any reports, announcements, or committee updates?
Just quickly, the Saline Fire Board met for a board retreat recently. It was a fruitful but long day. We are looking forward to reconvening that group and following up on some new methods to move our board forward. The Cable Commission will be meeting next week. And right now, our cable channel seems to be running A-OK. Thank you, Mr. Ben. And, but we do have an opening on the Cable Commission. So if you are a City of Saline resident and a subscriber to Comcast Television, we would love to have you join our board. So if you are interested, please reach out to myself or the city manager.
Very good, thank you. Mr. CEO, any reports or announcements?
Yes, Your Honor. About a week and a half ago, the Cemetery Board had a meeting, quarterly meeting. There's not a whole lot new going on, although Chris Benedict did report that the city not only has removed some old trees, but they've planted some new trees up there. So if you get a chance, go up there near the statue and the podium and take a look at the new trees that are in place up there. Near that concrete pad.
Very good. Mr. Lesh, any community updates or reports from various boards or commissions?
I just wanted to publicly thank the businesses and entities that contributed to a very successful Jazz in the Park, which was last month. We exceeded the amount that we had needed to raise, so we have a little bit of seed money for next year's event. So hopefully it will even be a bigger event. And because it was such a tiring event, the Arts and Culture Committee will not be having a meeting in August, and we will reconvene in September.
Very good. Well, please thank the members of the Arts and Culture Committee for their diligence in organizing that event. I was down there for about 2.5 hours, and I was very impressed, and it was very well received by members of the Saline community. So thank you. If there's no additional, Mr. Gerber, you have
Sorry, I had one more. We had our final wellhead protection meeting today, which that will be a presentation to come to before council at our next meeting. It's really this plan that we've been working on to basically identify where our aquifer is and some of the other issues that are related to it. And that will be, as I said, the next meeting.
Very good. The last item is vacant industrial buildings, of which we have one currently, and one will likely be on the market in the next 6 to 8 months. So I did want to provide some public comments because I have been in touch with our representatives from Ann Arbor Spark. So Ann Arbor Spark recently met with the HR manager of ABC Technologies, which is formerly Windsor Mold, to discuss support measures for employees affected by changes at their Saline facilities, which will continue to operate 7 days a week through at least December 2024. Their HR lead is taking a proactive approach to assisting affected employees, including through job fairs, direct placements, and connecting to opportunities at other ABC facilities. Michigan Works of Southeast Michigan is also involved and is offering various support services, including resume building, training assistance, on-site visits from career advisors. Spark will share information on affected employees with other locally based companies that are growing, and will continue to monitor the future plans for the building and property as well, and I expect additional updates in the coming months. Apart from ABC Technologies, again, formerly Windsor Mold, the property that is currently vacant and on the market was formerly occupied by Flat Out, which was a subsidiary of Marzetti's. We've had several interested parties and a very professional and detailed packet of information about the property and site is available through a listing agent, through Ann Arbor Spark, and I also shared it on my social media pages. So if you know of a dynamic growing business in Washtenaw County in Southeast Michigan or anywhere in the continental United States or the world for that matter, who's looking to grow or to create a presence in our area, it's a great facility. It's a well-maintained facility, and I think Marzetti would be very cooperative in finalizing a sales agreement for that parcel, which is located on Woodland Drive, actually at the corner of Woodland and Industrial. So again, as more information becomes available, I will be sure to share it. But again, we have one vacant property currently in our industrial park, one business that will be closing likely in the first quarter of 2025. And I speak not only for myself, but my colleagues were very eager to see both properties or both structures filled with strong dynamic businesses that can contribute to the quality of life of the Saline community. With that, does staff have anything they'd like to share before I seek a motion to adjourn? But I have a public comment period first. Oh, Ms. Royal, not that it's a requirement, but do you have any comments about tomorrow's election? Okay, polls are open from 7 to 8. Okay, precincts are the Methodist Church and Liberty School. Okay, very good. Then we come now to the second public comment period under the Open Meetings Act. Any person may come forward at this time, may comment or question to City Council. This public comment period will be limited to 3 minutes per person. Anyone who would like to speak is requested, but of course not required to state his or her name and address for the record. Please come to the podium. You will have 3 minutes.
Mr. Mayor, council, friends, I first want to congratulate all of you, the hard work, the success of the strategic plan. It said FY25, I believe. Some of the language should be for the next 20 years instead of just next year. I want to give the comments about this, and both of you on both sides, doers and thinkers, doing the great job. And I really appreciate the time you spend. I think about a year. I learned quite a lot as the observer, Saline observer, not Ann Arbor observer. And I just really appreciate that the effort, the time, the thought, and you give to the public. And I want to thank you, and also as the Chinese American, I think this is the best system. Saline make an example, and just like other cities, you know how strategically we can be forward-looking and also futuristic and also care about the people, and especially young people and minorities. So I want to thank you. And also, as the American Constitution is not just one set, we had the Reconstruction. And then eventually, up to Johnson administration, we have the human rights have major changes. So as the strategic plan of Saline, I think you all prepared that, just like a Bill of Rights. This city have to continue to add more. So therefore, I want to put forth this, by the way, 100% support, okay? However, I want to add the language of environment and the language of technology. When I say the environment, it's the environment of the whole world. When I talk about the technology, it's mid-tech. Middle-level technology for the middle class and the poor all over the world. So please consider that. Do I have 30 seconds?
40 seconds.
Great. Well, actually, I already said something. Thank you so much. Oh, the doers and thinkers. And I think that one thing I want to add is the imbalance about the hours you spend and the compensation. I think this level of government have the problem. We should really consider about the award. So therefore, you can have more time with the compensation, so can work more, better for the middle class and the poor. So this is the problem. I think we should really fix it. Thank you.
Thank you, Changming. Additional citizen comments? I'll defer to the city clerk. Were there any written comments provided in advance of tonight's meeting which the individual wanted their remarks read at this time? Okay, excellent. Well, please note our upcoming council meeting will be 2 weeks from today on Monday, the 19th. At this time, if there's nothing further to be brought before city council, the chair would be happy to entertain a motion to adjourn at 8:44.
So moved.
Moved by Lesh. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Dillon. All those in favor of adjourning signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Ayes have it. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.